Okay, welcome everyone. I am Nicolas Badiola from the BRT Center of Excellence, and I work there as community manager. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar. Today we have Chris Van Eyken from ITPD as our speaker. He will talk us about the BRT station design in an urban context. So I know this is a very interesting topic, and he will give a great presentation. After it, we'll have time for some questions. So if you have ones, please write them down in the chat so Chris can see them later. Uh, with my participation, I would like to conclude inviting you to join this monthly webinar. And if any one of you is interested to present here, please contact me through my email. So, without taking more time from Chris, you are very welcome, and the time is yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Van Eyken from ITDP US, as Nicholas has introduced me. I'm going to talk a bit about bus rapid transit in the urban context, and specifically a project we have been working on in Boston and some of the challenges we face there. A key to keep in mind if you haven't been to Boston before is it's one of the older cities in the United States, and so it's very much not auto-oriented. It's built as a walking city, and it's not typical of the US. So we've been looking to international examples to figure out how we can possibly get these BRT corridors going down some very narrow rights of ways. To begin, I'm going to just give a quick overview. I know this is the center of excellence, but we have to begin here. BRT has proven to be a great solution for our rapid transit needs. It's much more efficient cost-wise than some of the other options such as light rail or metro. But we often see BRT implemented in places such as this in Bogota, where it has plenty of right-of-way available and you can take all the space you need to add the amenities that a bus rapid transit system should have. Or here in Guangzhou, where it's in the urban context, but we still have a wider street where we can provide for all kind of different express services and passing lanes. And in Boston, that's not going to be an option for us. We have to figure out how to build our system on smaller rights of ways where we have different needs and concerns other than just providing rapid transit through the corridor. And we see that in some of the areas that we've looked to as an example. Mexico City, for example, this is the street that we now have line 4 on. It's on a very narrow right-of-way in the city center, and they have all kind of historic amenities, this UNESCO site, around the bus rapid transit corridor. So they've had to design the system to accommodate for all this. And this is an example we look to often because in Boston we have very narrow rights of ways and lots of historic amenities. It's an important city for the US in terms of how our revolution went out. So there are many sites that we don't want to disturb as we build our BRT. And some of the examples we've looked to abroad are Bogota, for example, where we have the environmental access, which goes right through the city center and has become a very high capacity link, but has also taken away space from cars to make it a pleasant urban amenity where people can walk outside peacefully, people can sit outside and enjoy their lunch. But CBDs in different areas do have similar challenges. You can see this street from Boston, where this is one of our highest demand links for bus demand, but it's a 2x2, both lanes of cars going northbound into the city center. And there's lots of space for pedestrians currently, but there's very little space to build any sort of infrastructure without removing the cars completely. And this is something we're considering, and I'll talk a bit about that later. But for now, we're going to move on and look at the different challenges that have been tackled around the world. For example, in Mexico City, we have the Metro bus, and Metro bus is very much in the center of the city for some of the corridors, and they've had to build these nice pedestrian ways to make sure that there's good access to stations. This is something we've looked at strongly in Boston. We do have some rights of ways that look like this on our phase 1 corridor, and it's a good example of making sure that people can access not only the station safely, but get across the BRT corridor to the other side without being an impediment to the pedestrian network that exists in the city. We've looked at the Belo Horizonte BRT, where they have a section that is just for bikes and bus and for pedestrians in the center, and that's a good option for us in some of these sections of our corridor. And I've considered the design of the system in Dar es Salaam, which is now running interim service, where in the historic downtown they have very narrow rights of way where they've had to accommodate for a high demand of buses, a high demand and frequency of bus service. Now, to begin discussing our proposal for BRT in Boston, I'll go through our situation and how we've determined our corridors, and then talk a bit about the challenges we're facing. So first, in Boston, the existing system isn't meeting the city's needs. While there is the first metro system that was ever constructed in the United States in Boston, it's not expansive enough to meet the needs of all the residents of the city. You can see there's a large gap between the orange line in the north and the red line as it continues down south to the east. This is the neighborhoods of Dorchester and Roxbury. They're two very dense neighborhoods that are historically underserved. For the most part, they have a higher rate of poverty, and it's more likely that you'll find black residents in these neighborhoods. And for years and years, they've been promised that the system would be extended to their neighborhood, and it just hasn't happened. And so this has degraded the commute for the peoples in this neighborhood and has given them much less access to jobs and opportunities that are present in the city. While Boston is good in terms of PNT, with a 63% rate, compared to other US cities, it's still failing some of its most needy citizens. Sorry, my graph doesn't appear to be showing here, but it would have illustrated for you that while the system is pretty expansive, we do have every day 400,000 people riding on the local bus network. And while the bus, I don't think the bus is in any way an inferior service, and I think it serves this community and is an important link for them. But if you look at this map here, the bus speeds in Boston are very slow. This isn't a map I created, it's an independent project that tracks bus speeds in real time. And this is the outbound commute going back home on Friday afternoon last week. And you can see the people that ride the buses have very long commute times. There's lots of red on the map. The few places that you see green are commuter buses that are taking expressways outside the city to the suburbs. So even people that live further out from these centrally located neighborhoods are having more trouble getting to their city center, despite the fact that they should be within 20 minutes of a commute if they had a bus service that was working for them. And further, bus riders don't just have slow commutes, they face poor conditions. This is the Dudley station, which is one of the highest demand bus stations in all of Boston. It's right in the middle of the Dudley neighborhood, which is a low-income African-American community. And for folks that live here, they don't have much protection from the elements. There's an overhang that prevents snow and rain from getting on them. But on days in which it's very cold or very hot, because you see both in Boston, they're sort of just faced with the elements. And the elements are a very strong factor in why Boston is currently looking to improve its transit service. In the winter of 2015, a series of snowstorms, which left record snowfall, caused the bus and the rail system to both have extensive backlog because the system just shut down and it wasn't resilient enough to handle the demand that it needed to handle every day. So currently the system is in crisis where there's not enough funding to build further metro, and there's lots of deferred maintenance that they're trying to catch up on with the little funding they have. So we think bus rapid transit is a solution to this problem, as it will provide a high quality rapid transit service, but it will do it at a lower cost and in a way that's more resilient. So if our bus rapid transit system has some problems that the rail system had where the tracks were covered with snow, BRT buses aren't stuck in the corridor and it's easier to clear that off. so we can keep the system moving in snow conditions like this and moving quickly, not slowly like the buses that are stuck in this track before. And so where would BRT work in Boston? We did an extensive program of technical assistance with the Bar Foundation, and we consulted with a local community group on our technical outputs to make sure that they were in line with what they thought was feasible from a social and political standpoint. And the way we did that was looking at first demand in the city. So these are numbers from the fall 2012. We began our project in fall 2013. So we're actually currently updating the demand numbers for our service plan. I'm not going to discuss that on this though. But as you can see, close to the city center in Boston, these are the pink areas of Boston proper, and the other colors are the metro area. You see that the larger demand are pretty close into the city center, and this is bus only. So these are areas where the biggest bubbles are gaps in the rapid transit system. Sorry, I don't have an overlay here. So we mapped this by station to station boardings in the AM peak, and we also looked at it by total bus load. So the amount in the peak hour, that 7 to 8 a.m. peak hour, the amount of people that were on each bus. You've seen maps like this from other cities before. The thicker the line, the more people that are stuck on the bus. The further from green and the closer to red we get, the slower the speeds are. So we have lots of fat bars of reds and oranges here, and these are the places that we look to build our BRT. And after consulting with these local community groups and getting their input on what our maps look like and what they thought good corridor alignments were, we released in conjunction with the Bar Foundation a technical report, a report detailing what BRT is and recommending 5 corridors. And those 5 corridors were based on our technical outputs and include an extensive annex which you can look through and see how we reached our conclusions based on the demand models I just showed. But our 5 corridors would serve neighborhoods that are currently underserved by rapid transit and have high demands for buses. And we tested those against the current commute times that commuters face, and we saw between, at our lowest, a 12.5% decrease in commute times and an almost halving for the Dudley to downtown BRT. The Dudley to downtown is that central BRT spine that I spoke earlier. This goes through central neighborhoods in Boston that have been underserved, as I said before, and we could really, really improve the commute times for these neighborhoods and make this the highest demand BRT corridor, the phase 1, vastly improve the commute times for these people. And we would take the rapid transit, which I showed you earlier and currently looks like this, and we'd overlay our BRT corridors and close some of the gaps in the city's network. This would be great for the residents of these neighborhoods as they would have improved commute times, as I've said. But the issue we've had going forward with promoting BRT is that we're not the first group to propose BRT in Boston. There was a proposal about, I believe it's 10 years ago now, called the 28X that would serve that central BRT spine that I showed you before. And they had a bit of a false start in proposing it for the community where they didn't inform the local political representation properly that they were going to suggest this BRT corridor. And so when they showed these designs to the neighborhood and said, hey, we're going to take lanes away and we're going to build this great bus system for you, they didn't make sure that they had the backing of the local community and that people would stand up and say, yes, this is the system we need. So it was largely shut down because it didn't acknowledge the political realities and also historic realities, which were that light rail had been promised for this neighborhood for years, and the community leaders in the neighborhood were still pushing for the light rail. And nobody had explained to them that a bus rapid transit system is just as capable as light rail of providing reliable rapid transit. So they ended up taking lots of hits from this, and it set back BRT in Boston many years. And fortunately, we've had the opportunity to take this up again and push it forward. And the challenges of the system technically still remain. We have very limited right-of-way. And these are the gray line you see going down the middle is the phase 1 corridor that I've shown you over and over again, and the multicolors are the current bus operations operating on this corridor. This is what we're looking to as we begin thinking about our service planning for the corridor. But as you can see, there's a high congestion of bus routes that converge in this street. It's very important for bus transit in Boston. So we have to be very careful in the way that we design this. And I'll take you along just to, again, to provide context. This is where the corridor is. It's that long black line that goes all the way up, not the branches off. And I'll show you three different rights of way that we face here. One here is on Warren Street on the southern end. You can see it's very wide. It's almost a pre-BRT street, so to speak, where if we wanted to, we could take the lanes today and build the stations in the existing median. And we have, if we got the proper support and the proper backing, we wouldn't have much trouble technically implementing BRT here. The problem arises as we get further north. This is about in the middle of the corridor on Warren Street. And this area I chose to show you because this is actually the section that caused the most uproar on the 28X project because it's currently a 2x2 with parking on both sides and a bike lane, and it's right in front of a post office with lots of loading needs. And the concern was to neighbors' community was there's not many redundant streets around here, so how can we build the BRT corridor and take lanes away from cars without seriously degrading the traffic for general purposes such as your private vehicles and loading and deliveries from the post office. And lastly, we have this section that I showed you earlier, where this is entering the downtown near their government center. It's where all the rapid transit converges, and it's how we would get the BRT from the sections further south into the downtown, into the job centers that people in those neighborhoods want the BRT to reach. Excuse me. And it provides both a challenge and an opportunity. If we were able to take space to make this a BRT only section, we already have wide sidewalks and amenities around here that people could access and walk to reliably, but we have to find a solution for getting this auto traffic away from the street without opposition from the community surrounding it. This is mostly a business community. Many people are upper income and drive already and avoid rapid transit if they can. So we have to make the case for how this will improve commutes in Boston and improve the quality of life in Boston and also drive development in this area without being detrimental to business interest. And we've been doing that by looking to examples from abroad. And so one of our chief ones is Bogota, Colombia, where we've actually taken people from Boston to look at the environmental access, and we've talked to them about how this has improved quality of life in the city center from a transit standpoint. Bus rapid transit Transmilenio has made commute times much better for people reaching these areas, and it's also provided urban amenities in the area. So even if you're not taking Transmilenio every day, you can enjoy walking along the environmental access or sitting outside enjoying your lunch. It's created new public space that was perfect, that didn't exist before in an area where the workers would often leave their jobs and not have a place where they can just walk and enjoy their lunch break. We've looked to Mexico City, as I showed you before, the Line 4, which we've also shown Boston delegations, which is a great example because we have all these different historical sites as we do in Boston that we have to treat with respect. And this BRT gave an example of how we can do that while also making a bus bed street that is more comfortable for the riders and the walkers. We've also looked to examples from cities like Joburg where they've taken the bus rapid transit and run it on adjacent streets in one-way pairs, which is an example that we may have to look to if we can't convince them that BRT only is the proper way to go through the city center. And by doing these pairs, like it does raise the cost of implementation because we have two stations and we have more maintenance that we have to do and more security concerns because we have to monitor two different stations. But it is a solution for how we can get it through the city center with very narrow rights of way. And we've also looked to an example from Cleveland, Ohio. This is the Healthline Silver Line, Silver Standard BRT. It's currently the highest rated in the United States. It's always a positive example for us because it's leveraged more than $5 billion in real estate investment. So it's not so much of an example of design because the right of way is different than what we have in Boston, but it is an example that we can point to in convincing local policymakers that bus rapid transit isn't just a transit system, but it's something that can anchor serious development in Boston, and it could help them improve their local economy and leverage investment in their housing supply. And so, with these things in mind, we've created these sort of very quick and dirty, but informative, I think, examples of what rights of way in Boston could look like. This is a two-way bus rapid transit on a one-way street for just drivers in general. We included a bike lane here. We could probably, and we can fit bike lanes in as well that provide local connections. One of the things, as we've discussed this in Boston, is that the bike community is very strong, and they want us to make sure that the bus rapid transit also has amenities for cyclists. So you'll see that throughout our throughout this our slides. And we've also looked at a 70-foot width where we can give both directions for cars as well as BRT, and we've suggested a bus ped plaza in the section that I've shown you now twice, where it would be for BRT only and pedestrians, and we'd make that public space a little bit nicer so people can sit outside and enjoy it. And moving forward, we're trying to think of how we can convince the public that this is the right direction forward for Boston. And this is so much not me answering the question, but me looking to see to gain further examples from across the world. If you have any you could provide after. And the way we've done that so far is study tours to educate policymakers. As I said, we took policymakers to Boston, we took them to Bogota, we took them to Medellin. And we're looking to do more of this in the future, as it's a tough sell for policymakers because they know that once the system begins its construction and you see the negatives of what can happen, it's the streets are all torn up and traffic patterns are changed before the system gets implemented. They're going to have to speak from experience and a place of confidence about how BRT can properly work for them. So by taking them here, we've had them talk to local policymakers and officials at Transmilenio and Metrobus and have them learn how they've gotten over those obstacles and how Boston can learn from that example and bring it forward. And we've also been able to show them what the infrastructure looks like on sections that are very narrow. This is an example in Medellin that we took them to. They can see how pedestrians interact with it and how it's working for the local neighborhood, and how bus ped is a strong option if you have a high degree of walking in your city, such as Boston does. And we've also taken the opportunity we have to do more public facing events. So this fall into the winter, we're going to be hosting a station design contest where we'll invite local architects and architecture students to design what a station could look like and how it would look like in Boston. So this is an example from a similar contest that was held in Chicago ahead of their Loop BRT project, where they had a local architecture nonprofit that is sort of a convening space for architects in the city sponsor a contest, and they received lots of great submissions, and this was their first place prize. It's not what they actually implemented, but it still inspired local community and got them excited about what bus rapid transit could be. There was also an example earlier this year in Indianapolis, which is looking to implement their BRT next year, where they had a design that they sort of narrowed the scope of the design and made sure that the architects were designing BRT stations, but it had to meet certain specifications, such as reflecting the historical character of the city and using materials that reflected the industries located in the city. So they came up with a really pretty design that reflected the culture and the heritage of their city, and we're hoping to get something similar in Boston. And I'm sorry, but that's the end of my presentation. I'm a little short today. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask?